Greetings and salutations. This is HUGH JARSZ, and for some reason my icon's not coming up, which is kind of weird. Anyway, here I am. Let's have a look who's in the chat. Right tab. Oops, it's starting again. Oh, that's right. I'm watching the... Oh! All right. Yes, I'm getting used to the StreamYard still. And yes, it's time to start putting Gary in timeout. He's just spewing rubbish. Hello, Clive Wells. I think Dora was in earlier, but has disappeared. Hello, Dog Walker. Who else we got? Fred Bailey. G'day, mate. Who else? Ricky Bell. Hello, Ricky. And that looks like all we have at the moment. Oh, Alien X Gaming. How are you, mate? It's always good to see you. Pixel 2 Domination. Hello. I said hello in the chat, actually. So... Oh, there's Dora. Hello, Dora. Here, stop censoring Gary. Yeah, he's a special one, isn't he? Jahannam, how are you, mate? Good to see you. Tusk is there. Hey, Tusk. I enjoyed your pork stir fry video. That had my lips salivating. Lips salivating? Tongue salivating. Mouth salivating. Whatever. There we are. All right. PhD Tony will be coming in soon. Irish Demon was supposed to be here, but I suspect he hasn't woken up yet. So I have a little treat. If I can get it to share properly. And let's see if that works. There's no sound on this one. It's Corgi Racing. Yes, Corgi Racing is actually a thing. And like most Corgis, they're not very obedient. That one got the idea. There he is. He won. How about that? All right. So back here. It's hard doing this by yourself. It'd be nice to have someone else to do it occasionally, but I've got to try doing this by myself so I'll learn how to do it. Now, who's like the Corgi Racing? Did you get to see it? Faux Hammer. G'day, Faux Hammer. No, it's not Professor Bell this time. Professor Bell was on last week, and I have a little news on that. At the end of last week's live stream, we asked Rachie if she wanted to come on and discuss the questions she has with Professor Bell, and both Professor Bell and Rachie agreed to that. But I suggested to Rachie that she do it after I put out my video answering her questions, which I have been slack and haven't got out yet. So once I've got that out and she's had a chance to look at that, we'll get Professor Bell and Rachie on and we'll get that done. Jahannam saying it's the first time I got his first person to get his name right the first time. I'm not surprised. Oh, you didn't see the Corgi Racing? Let's try again. So share screen. So, and then I go to the video, which is this one. Can you see it now? I'll let it run. All right. So the video is over. Did anyone see anything? And welcome to PhD Tony. How are you, mate?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How's life in Canberra?
Quite enough. Rather warm, but I guess you guys will know all about that up in your northern reaches.
It's been relatively cool for summer, actually, so it hasn't been bad. Okay. And apparently my screen didn't share, which is a bit of a problem. I'm not sure what's going on. I mean, I clicked the right thing. Oh, hang on. Let's try again. I'm just going to play this video, Tony. How about that, folks?
Well, there's the Corgi Nationals.
You can see it? Good. And see the Corgis being very obedient by running in the right direction.
Well, I put that down. I put that down to a failure of the owners. You know, do you have them running around the track every day? No, you don't.
Well, they do run a lot. Being cattle dogs, they like to run.
Okay.
But yes, they're very stubborn as well. So yeah. Okay, so I hope everyone saw that. I'm going to have to move the chat out. Just 1 second. And I'll get this over here so I can see the chat at the same time. All right. Now, I think everything's working now. Yes, so Irish Demon was going to join me, but I suspect he's still asleep because it's only 6:30 in the morning where he is. Yeah, well, I did ask him to get up early, so I guess I slept through one of his streams because his streams start at like midnight for me, so it's a bit late.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, well, I might, let's pick something. Oops, not that one. Damn it. Oh, I'm having fun today. This is Team Skeptic levels of fail, isn't it? And now my PC is not responding. Oh, wonderful. Well, forget that idea. Let's do it this way. So Sleeping Warrior I wanted to have a chat about. On my community page, I posted something that he posted up. And Mr. Sensible, it's about Mr. Sensible. And he responded, Mr. Sensible responded with a video about it all, which was good because it's much better for Mr. Sensible to talk about these things than someone else. But I just thought it was just prove what an utterly disgusting POS Sleeping Warrior is. He said, anyone using cheese as a symbology is a known reference to paedophilia. Seems sensible. It's pretty clear who he's talking about if you know who Mr. Sensible is.
Yes. I am often struck by the absolute lack of ethical standards amongst the more prominent flat earthers, and Sleeping Warrior is foremost amongst those. Well, one of the foremost. Actually, I still think that Oakley is to some degree worse. But one of the things about Oakley is that Oakley isn't ideological. He is just he's just a monstrous asshole. And actually, I feel that that's a little bit unfair because on this stream, I don't feel we should take a stance against asses. Out of due deference to yourself.
Why? What's that got to do with me?
They're just but particularly Sleeping Warrior, there is absolutely no there's no lie he won't tell if it will serve his purposes. And it also gives lie to his claim that what he said about conspiracy cats was perfectly innocent. No, he just throws out these accusations against people he wants to discredit.
Yeah. And his training as a lawyer, whether or not he actually successfully achieved it or not, is another matter. But his training as a lawyer would have taken him down that path. And there's two types of lawyers: the ones that become lawyers to do good in the world, and the other type.
Yeah.
And I have several mates who are lawyers who are the first type. A couple of them are QC, so they've achieved pretty much the top of their profession, apart from being a judge. And they're doing good in the world, and they are nothing like Anthony Riley whatsoever. So it sort of shows that if you're going to succeed, don't be like Anthony Riley.
Yeah, it's the Riley's entire methodology is based on basically being a criminal lawyer to somebody who is actually guilty, right? That's his mindset. Is as long as I can vaguely convince a half-educated jury that there is some sliver of doubt as to what the evidence might maintain, then they have to find in my favor. It's got absolutely no relationship to demonstrable reality.
Now, I don't want to harp on Riley for too much, but yeah, I suspect He went into flat Earth. I don't think he believes in flat Earth really, but I think he went into flat Earth with that lawyer mindset, saying, if I can prove that the Earth is flat, even though I know it's not, and convince other people, then that proves what a good lawyer I am, because a lawyer's job is to convince people of whatever. As you said, a criminal who is guilty, if you can convince the jury that they're innocent, then you're a good lawyer in that sense. People will want to have you as their lawyer. And that's to my observation, it's just my opinion, that's his approach to what he does with his videos.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's hard to sort of vocalize the contempt I have for Riley. But in any sane world, he would be he would be on a work for the dole program, shoveling in potholes on roads.
As sophisticated as that.
Yeah, well, I think as long as there's an adult decision maker, telling him where to fill in the holes, I think we're all good. But it's not clear to me why. Well, this is the other part of it that's so frustrating. You listening to this man speak for like 30 seconds. Any sane human being would come to the conclusion, well, this is a guy I just shouldn't listen to. He's an idiot. He's ignorant, and he's demonstrably deranged about the quality of his own intellectual processes. And that's three strikes. He's never going to say anything worthwhile ever.
He's stuck on Dunning-Kruger Mount Stupid, isn't he?
Yeah. He's got a hotel there, and he's trying to advertise other people to join him. I have literally never heard Anthony Riley say anything relevant, important, or true.
The true thing being the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yes, the true thing being the biggest thing.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about Anthony Riley. I just wanted to cover that to support Mr. Sensible, because people shouldn't be making such allegations, even obliquely, because the test is always, will a reasonable person think that that's directed at Mr. Sensible? And the fact that anyone who knows Mr. Sensible would think that, we all have, that suggests that test would fail in court. But the reason we're here is what happened on Mr. Sensible's stream last night. Let's see if I can share the screen this time. Here we go. All right. So this is screenshots I've taken from Mr. Sensible's screen. MultiT0mT0m came in and he said, I will debate any PhD, as you can see at the top here. We're looking at the chat. If you're don't know where to look, and if you're on a phone, well, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to see it. Down the bottom, I responded, MultiT0mT0m, cool, happy to do it on my channel, I asked him. And then, oh, hang on, I can't see the buttons because this thing's in the way. There we go. Scroll on. There we go. So, so that's just to show the continuity. And he responded, anytime, any place. So I thought, okay, good. So I said, okay, 11 p.m. UTC, which is in 15 minutes on, well, I put the wrong date, January the 14th, but obviously I meant the 13th. And I asked you to contact me on my Discord so that we could set it up. And the next one. So I sent him my Discord link, so he had no excuse. You can see that's the time up here. And then he's got the Discord link, so he could contact me and say, okay, here I am. Let's set it up. But And then I checked with him to ask if he was right for tomorrow. He was still commenting, as you see down here, why do people love pussy so much? So I responded, we don't love you.
Yes.
And scroll on. Oh, yes, there we are. So I said, all you need to do to debate a PhD, as he said he would anytime, anywhere, is send me a Discord message. And gave him another link to my Discord so that he could contact me. And here's where he got, instead of actually saying, okay, I'll do that to show he's not a pussy and he was going to stand up to his words, he instead asked someone called HUGH JARSZ, I don't know who that is it PhD Tony? And then there was a message that was hidden, but I unhid it for this purpose. And that one there, Tony, can you see that up the top?
Just give me a moment to get into the right window. No, I can't. Oh, I can't read it. It's not.
All right. It says Tony is he spells it EEDIOT. The irony of someone spelling idiot like that is just dripping.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and then I responded saying, good, then you'd have nothing to fear if I got him. At that point, I hadn't decided who it was going to be. I was going to ask you, I was going to ask a couple of other people as well, and I've asked one more. We'll get to him in a few minutes. And yeah, so he said he wanted to do it. He's got no reason to fear it. And yet, by the end of the stream, I hadn't had a message. I still haven't had a message. So I'm only assuming that he is not going to show. But he's a gutless wonder.
He's always wandering around saying that he'll have that he'll debate anybody, and et cetera, et cetera. I've never seen him follow through on any of those. Faux Hammer, has issued challenges to him. Dead Kennedy in Space, I think, has it just. Lots and lots of people have thrown out challenges, and he's not interested in any of them. He just, I don't know what it is that he thinks he's achieving by claiming that he'll debate anybody anytime. He just makes himself look even more ridiculous, as though. That's something worth achieving.
Which is hard to sort of comprehend, isn't it?
It is
ridiculous.
It is hard. It is hard to comprehend. I was stunned that he's actually English.
Yeah.
Because I thought from his accent that he was some brand of Scandinavian or perhaps Dutch. Yeah.
Well, I believe he's Middle Eastern. By heritage,
right? Okay.
So it sounds to me like an anglicized version of a Middle Eastern accent.
Okay.
But that's my opinion. I don't know if it's for real. His videos imply that he's a Muslim, for at least. But I can hear the Arabic accent in his speaking, but I could also hear British in there as well. So how people like Lebanese in Australia have a particular accent that's different from everyone else. And it's that kind of thing. He's a gutless wonder. He hasn't showed up. He's got 11 minutes until the time that we set. So if he does show up, I'll bring him in. I'll send him a link. And as long as he contacts me on Discord so I can send him a link, or if he lets me know what his email address is so that I've got some way of contacting him. But otherwise, he's spoken the big words, and he's run away. So gutless wonder.
Well, and he always has been. It is weird to me that sort of if you have a position, surely you're confident enough to debate that position, and if you're not confident enough to debate that position, then why do you hold that position? If you can't present the argument in favor of it.
not everyone's very good at debating, of course. I put myself in the same situation. I'm not really good off the cuff when I'm debating points because I don't know everything. I'm happy to respond in a video because I can think about it and put together my thoughts and express it properly. But yeah, it's but you're right. If you believe in what you're talking about, then you should be capable of defending it in some way. Because otherwise, how did you get to that conclusion in the first place? The answer is they've listened to someone else and they just taken their word for it without any real understanding.
Yeah, it's a very strange. They've got very strange intellectual constructs. Though it must be said that there are people in the debunking community who are firmly convinced that I'm an intellectual fraud. So
really,
it's it's
but you're easy to find.
Well,
verify.
Yeah, I would have thought so, but there are those who I don't know, just don't like me. But whatever. Yeah. Tony Regime points out that MultiT0mT0m does believe that he's the world's foremost flat earther and that he is way smarter than Einstein.
Yes, top flat earther on the globe.
Yes.
So, just 1 second. I've got. Oops. No. Let's go back to that. All right. So I'm just going to share my screen because we have some other news. This morning, Anna Marisax put out a new video. Oops, I've lost it. There we go. Anna Marisax, if you want to subscribe to her, the link is in the description, as is PhD Tony's. And I see that we are joined by PhD Pete. So now we have 2 PhDs in the call. How are you, Pete?
Not too bad. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Pete,
Excellent.
meet PhD Tony.
How you going, Tony?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Pete?
Not too bad. And who are we waiting around for today?
We're waiting for a guy called MultiT0mT0m, but I suspect he's not going to show. So I'm hoping that we'll just have a nice cerebral conversation between the 3 of us.
Excellent.
So, Pete, can you just introduce yourself and, in general terms, obviously, give us some idea of who you are and what your qualifications are?
Well, I suppose my qualification is it's a PhD is the highest qualification I've got, and it was in biology, so in molecular genetics, and probably completed that about 10 years ago now. That's not exactly relevant to the flat Earth conspiracy, but it does always puzzle me as to why people hold to such bizarre beliefs. Perhaps there's a degree of mental illness or incapacity in there somewhere. Yeah, so I have worked in research for many years, and more recently in I suppose, science policy would be the way to describe it. But yeah, my PhD work was on the relationship between organisms and the presence of certain organisms in Australia that had not been recorded there before. So it was a bit of an exploratory piece of work. Probably not the greatest PhD that's ever been written, by the way. But I think any kind of PhD is really just a passage that you have to go through to demonstrate that you can use science to create a narrative that adds to our knowledge of the world, and it requires significant effort to do it, and gives you recognition by your peers. So I don't think it necessarily makes you any smarter than anyone who doesn't have a PhD or hasn't undergone that process previously. But certainly you have to work your backside off for it, and you should claim the credit for it.
And yes, it's definitely proof that you know more than some idiot on the internet just spouting out rubbish.
Well, maybe, but there's a lot of those out there, and they tend to command a large audience.
They do. And just to remind people, Tony, do you want to refresh our memory on what your qualifications are in general terms?
So I've got an honours degree in mathematics, and went on to do a PhD in geophysics. Can't help but echo Pete's comments there. That having a PhD doesn't necessarily mean that you're vastly more intelligent than anybody else. It means there are sort of minimum intelligence requirements, but just because somebody doesn't have a PhD doesn't mean that they're stupid, doesn't mean that they aren't smart. It's just a recognition that you're smart and you've worked, and you've achieved a very high standard of technical competence in your chosen field and critical analysis abilities in general. But that being said, there are some people with PhDs who choose not to exercise that ability. So it cuts both ways. There are some PhDs I regard as not very great. And there are some people without PhDs who I think are very, very bright, very, very intelligent indeed.
So 3 minutes until the time we set for MultiT0mT0m to show up, and I've had no indication that he's going to show up, and I'm not holding out any hope. So I was wondering if people in the chat might want to ask our two PhDs any particular sciencey questions that might be on their mind right now, and we'll see how they answer them.
I had a question for Pete, actually, which was, over the past year, we've had a number of people step forward and assert, and indeed, Sleeping Warrior, whom we were just discussing, is one of them, that there is no evidence that viruses make people ill. And I wanted to ask you your opinion on that.
No evidence that viruses make people ill.
Yeah.
That's my response. I don't. I mean, I suppose if they're going to make a claim like that, the burden of evidence lies with them, rather than with the more sane members of society. So clearly, viruses make people ill. I mean, what do I need to do to debunk? Well, I did hear that that 5G technology was being used to spread the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. Yes. This is
even in places that don't have 5G.
I just don't understand how that could be done, because viruses are obviously biological organisms. Self-replicating pieces of DNA that may or may not have a jacket that they live in, or RNA as well. But how could you transmit that molecule using radio waves? I don't understand.
So the argument is that basically the DNA and RNA packets that we think of as viruses are actually a byproduct of the harmful effects of electromagnetic radiation. And so it's actually the electromagnetic radiation from the 5G towers that is causing the harm, and these viral things are actually just a byproduct of the harm that's being done. They are in fact a product of cells within the body trying to heal themselves.
Well, I suppose that's why we have something called Koch's postulates that we use in biological experiments. Sorry?
Cox. It was another creator turned that into a meme. So
right. So that's why we have control groups in experiments. So if 5G radiation is affecting the whole world, I would imagine it would be impossible to have a control group in an experiment that is not affected by 5G radiation. And therefore, you would never have a group of people who don't get sick when they're injected with a particular virus, as opposed to the group that do. Without actually talking to one of these people, it would be difficult to try and debunk their arguments, I would imagine, because
I'm not sure that
really
help you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're just oxygen thieves, really, aren't they?
Well,
Yes.
some of them claim to be doctors, so medical doctors, which to me is just terrifying.
That doctor that was supporting Trump, the witch doctor from Africa. She had some pretty interesting ideas, and I can't remember what her name is. And there was there's Dr. Pete Evans in Australia. Everything that Pete says, he's got those beautiful blue eyes. So he must be telling the truth.
Isn't he a chef?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a chef.
The doctor of chefery.
But anyway, how are the chat doing? What questions have they got?
Well, we had a question about that. What did we think about that Israeli guy who said that aliens existed? Ricky Bell said that one.
Okay, so, well, I mean, I think it's more than likely that there is extraterrestrial, that there are extraterrestrial life forms. Just the balance of probabilities suggests that there are. I don't think that any have made it to Earth, but if they do, they seem to have an enormous capacity for interstellar navigation and travel, only to end up in quite in close proximity to schizophrenic rednecks, which seems you've got to wonder, what are they hoping to achieve by all of this? But,
yes, I remember a Gary Larson Farside comic where it had two old hillbillies, and the guy one says, "Ma, fetch a shotgun! The aliens are after the chickens again." But you were talking about the rednecks.
Yes, that's right. But Pete is probably in a better position to address that question, actually, given his speciality.
Well, it was interesting. A long time ago, I actually got contacted by somebody who wanted to look at organisms that would be suitable for terraforming Mars. And this is a serious piece of work that people are doing. So, I mean, that's about taking life from Earth and seeing whether it could survive on Mars and be useful, which I think is, well, it depends on whether you think that you hold a philosophical view that you're an ecological conservative and everything should be kept out, and we should be conserving everything, or you take the alternative view that life is what it is and you can't avoid things from being introduced to new areas, and taking things to Mars, we may accidentally contaminate it, and who knows what will eventuate from that. I always find those arguments very interesting, but I think that guy was trying to sell a book. I think if you look into it, he has a book coming out, and he was trying to drum up some publicity for his book. This was this Israeli fellow. I don't know. I think there are certainly some credible pieces of evidence out there for things that we don't understand, and I'm talking about those videos that are released by the Air Force. I find that really interesting. I haven't looked into it. The Tic Tac, UFO, UAP, drone, whatever it was. I find that really interesting. I haven't looked into it in great detail. I just think it's something that's of interest to everybody on the Earth, and it's of global significance, and we should pay attention to it. But with the ideas that have been put forward around warp drives recently, I also think that's pretty interesting. It's something that potentially, if you had enough energy, you could look at trying to do something like that going to the future. So that's not to say that there aren't other civilizations out there that have done that, thousands of years ago. That's entirely possible. But that would be the only way that you could really traverse such inconceivably enormous distances across the universe if you wanted to make contact with other civilizations. I'm always intrigued by these things, and I'm not an astronomer, I'm not a cosmologist, I don't understand those things at all in any way, shape or form. But I was recently intrigued by the tone signal that was picked up by the Parkes radio telescope that was coming from a nearby galaxy, a nearby star.
Closest star,
and it's supposed to have a giant super Earth that floats around it. And they still haven't finished the analysis of the data from what I can work out. So they're not entirely sure whether it's just an artifact, being out at Parkes and having to focus very close to the horizon to observe the signal. It's always entirely possible that they're picking up interference from Earth. But I suppose we wait to see what the final data analysis shows with that.
Well, you pretty much have to assume that it's interference to start with. Extraordinary hypotheses need extraordinary evidence, and if there's any chance it could be Earth-based, then that's where you've got to start, basically. I think Tony Regime summed up the theory, the approach, though, and he says aliens exist, but distances are so great that we are unlikely to meet them. And I think that's right. In an infinite universe, anything, even Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is possible. And I'd say there's definitely life out there. I think there's definitely life even in our solar system, not on Earth. And in the galaxy as big as ours, let alone the whole universe, surely some intelligent life has formed because it formed here. The distances, there's no way of traversing those distances with the science that we understand right now. There might be a science that we will understand in the future. It might be 10,000 years, might be 1,000,000 years, who knows? But it's not possible at the moment, so it's impossible for us to even conceive of it, that they could possibly get here.
Well, and every moment that goes past, we're getting further apart. And so eventually the universe will just fade out in a poof. And
the heat death.
Gigantic, there'll just be nothing there. Maybe a bit of background radiation, but it'll just be a dark, cold place. And then that begs the question of whether, what's happening with other universes, and will other universes expand out of that? I find that stuff really fascinating, and I'd encourage anyone who believes that the Earth is a disk to subscribe to PBS Spacetime and watch their videos, because they're fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of really elegant science that goes on, and it just precludes the possibility of Earth being a disk. You just you look at interstellar structures. You look at the sort of the cosmological scale, or the intergalactic scale. There are just so many magnificent works of nature out there, and basically to hand wave them away as just lights on a dome, pretty pictures. I don't understand the mentality there.
I'm just watching Gary Binger in the chat making a fool of himself as always, and saying that his wife is a registered nurse and she's refusing the vaccine, which worries me, because it means that hello.
Yes, Gary. Yes, Gary. Your wife is an idiot. She married you.
Well, that's true. It's proof positive, isn't it? I'm just noticing that. Oh no, did anyone else get buffering? I just got buffering on the stream, but no one else seems to be complaining. So, he says many doctors and nurses and other first responders are rejecting the vaccine. Well, there's two reasons for that. One, it's never wise to accept the very first iteration of something. You want to see how it pans out first. But that's a risk management decision you've got to make. You've got to trade off against actually getting it. And the other reason is that they're nutters. But he said many doctors. Many doesn't quantify it. Many implies more than 50%. but I think it's more than 0.005%. So, Gary, do better. Quantify it. When you say many, what do you mean?
Yes, how many?
All you're told us about is one out of millions, literally around the world. That's not a lot. And that's a good preview on that one.
And yes, that an individual, and this is the argument is not that on the scale of individuals, right? Can I assert with scientific certainty that somebody who gets a particular individual who receives the vaccine will be protected from COVID forever? No, that's not how vaccines work. Generally, the protection, that the individual will be protected, but it's not. To my understanding, Pete may be able to correct me, but my understanding is that it's not a guarantee that people won't come down with this disease. It just makes it vastly more likely. Can I guarantee that the individual concerned won't suffer any quite serious adverse side effects? No, I can't guarantee that either. But what I can say is that if the vaccine is worth distributing and administering, then the frequency and severity of those side effects is much less than the frequency and severity of the disease it's designed to prevent. That's the whole point. Now, the existence of individuals who don't want to take the vaccine does not in any way establish a scientific reality in which the vaccine is not effective or is harmful, or or is part of some gigantic conspiracy to embed chips in people. Just that's not how science works. Anyway,
Do you want to add to that, Pete?
Well, all vaccines have side effects, and I mean that's why they do the research to demonstrate that you can have side effects. Most people don't get affected by them. Some people do suffer adverse reactions to vaccines. That's just part of the deal. Whether they cause autism and other things like that has not been greatly proved. It's not to say that they haven't contributed to somebody's autism in the past, but in the vast majority of people, they don't. And the idea is that once you're vaccinated, no different to the flu vaccination or any kind of vaccination, you will still become infected by the virus. You just won't get as sick as you would have had you not been vaccinated in the first place. And so that's the idea of trying to induce herd immunity through mass vaccination. Anyone who doesn't want to take a vaccination, that's fine. That's entirely your choice, and you should have the right to make that choice if you don't want to take a vaccination. But do realise that you're more likely to get extremely sick, and so are those around you who are unvaccinated. And this is not a joke. People are dying of this disease. It's not
over 1 million so far.
It's not, and people say, "Oh, people die of the flu." Well, yeah, they do. They die of the flu too. They die of this as well. So if we can vaccinate and reduce the number of people who die, I don't see what the argument is for not getting vaccinated.
Yeah, it is a very strange mindset, and I mean, I'd have a lot more. There is so much wrong with just the mindset that Gary Wybenga, who is demonstrably ignorant of the shape of the planet, and every other scientific field, every other scientific endeavor undertaken by humankind, perceives himself as having something important to say about virology and epidemiology. You don't. Actually, neither do I. But I recognize that I don't have anything important to say, and I leave it to experts to say it. I don't go, well, I've got a PhD, therefore everything I say is on every individual topic is gold. That's not how this works. You listen to the people who know what they're talking about. And if Gary spent a little less time typing fatuous nonsense into chats, he might have something worth saying about anything.
Because he would have studied something. Yes, I got a little quick video to play for Gary. Oops, hang on, I've just lost it. There we go. That sums up Gary. The Dunning-Kruger Mount Stupid. That's where he lives. Oh, we got Professor Bell in the chat. The whole point is that in this vaccine, 90% and more produce antibodies, which makes them immune. Biology is difficult because even then a percentage will not produce antibodies when needed. Yeah, it's all about maximizing the effort, isn't it? It's a choice between having no defense and giving a majority of people a good chance. And that's what it's all about. Some people might choose not to get that, but that just, it seems, I can understand it if they would have side effects, but until you have it, how do you know? So, notice there are 7 downvotes. Apart from Gary, who else has been here who would have downvoted? They were cowards and didn't comment in the chat. And maybe they heard about MultiT0mT0m, but he didn't show up, so he's a coward too. I didn't know he had 6 friends, to be honest.
I'm pretty certain he doesn't. He probably just has 6 sock accounts. I know Gary at least has a sock account of my 2 cents worth or something like that. My 2 cents, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, it's all interaction, isn't it? The algorithm loves interaction. Yeah. It's kind of pointless when you downvote something that you've got no reason to downvote. But MultiT0mT0m was supposed to come on. Why would you downvote MultiT0mT0m coming on? I guess if you're not a supporter of MultiT0mT0m, you might do that. But he didn't come on, so there's no reason to do it. So anyway.
Perhaps the bigger problem for humanity as a whole is where this sort of anti-vaxxer conspiracy-minded thing came from, and how it has become such a significant social phenomena that it's affecting the outcome of elections. We can see one of the logical outcomes of this kind of mentality with the attack on the Capitol only a few days ago in the US. It's quite disturbing to see this sort of anti-science, anti-fact movement that is taking over in some sectors of society. Is it that some people feel so disaffected by? I don't know. I really don't know. I'd love to get some views on why this is happening.
Well, I have firm opinions on this, and the conservative side of politics are peddling a bunch of myths. Trickle-down economics works. It is necessary to screw the working class, screw every dime out of the working class to maximize corporate returns. The economy is run by corporate interests, so they're the people we have to take care of. There's just a series of myths, and whenever those myths get challenged, their response is, well, that person can't be trusted. That person's expertise doesn't pertain. The whole thing about healthcare, for instance, in the US, it is a demonstrable fact that socialized healthcare systems are cheaper, they're more efficient, they're more effective, and they just produce better outcomes for society as a whole. And they have the net benefit of increasing economic productivity because your workforce is healthier. But you've still got well over half the country who, in the US, who cling to the idea that it's some sort of socialist conspiracy to destabilize the United States, and therefore it must be a bad thing. So if you look at Tom Cruise, for instance, Ted Cruz, and on a fact-checking site, he is only marginally more truthful than Donald Trump. The difference, not that large. He lies about as often as Donald Trump does, and always has done throughout his political career. So the idea that just recently there's been this sundering of the links between Republicans and reality or conservatives and reality is untrue. They've been going down this path for a long, long time. And part of it is that the real thing that's happened since Reagan was president is that wealth inequality in the US has absolutely skyrocketed. Basically, the purchasing power of the middle class globally has stagnated. It's growing much more slowly than the economy in general is growing. But in the US, it has almost flatlined. The ability of the middle class to purchase has basically been static in real terms for the past 40 years or so. And people are sick of it. But it's a question of who are you going to blame? Are you going to blame those socialist liberals and their foreign mates, or are you going to blame the rich bastards who have corrupted the political process? That the answer to that question determines where on this spectrum you sit. To me, anyway.
It's just the thing that I know that Hugh doesn't like to discuss politics.
Yeah.
But it did strike me as remarkable that to be a conservative used to mean that you simply want to defend the values that exist and resist change, essentially, where you feel that change is not particularly productive and doesn't add anything to society. And the opposite of that being progressive. And neither of those things are left or right politic terms, but they've been turned into that. And we sort of, I suppose, nowadays, conservative means that you believe that Hillary Clinton drinks the blood of babies to stay young. Yeah. It's just gone completely bonkers.
Yeah.
She eats their heads.
Yeah, that's right. It just doesn't. I don't know. And this is the other false dichotomy. Just because I think conservatives are bad, doesn't mean that I think that the Democrats or the Labor Party are perfect, or the Greens, or they're all political parties. They all suffer from the same flaws that all political parties suffer from. They're more interested in getting power, winning elections, than they are in good governance. How about we return to a system where actually people are interested in good governance? But anyway.
Yes, definitely good governance. And so we'll leave the politics there. Real Sydness, I think, has just given me the tat of the stream. God, I can't word today. He says, anyone who asks for even more tentacles up their ass is just silly in his humble opinion. Tentacles up my ass has never been a problem so far. It's something I have to worry about.
Yeah, it's hard to I can say as a PhD. Yeah.
You've obviously been hanging around Rob Harris too much.
Yeah. But I'm sure that was relevant when he typed it. I'm just struggling to keep up with it.
Oh, I think you were talking about it was metaphorical tentacles from big whatever, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many big things, aren't there, in that context? So I'm just thinking we've got you two, we've got Professor Phil Bell, and we've got Clive Wells. So we've got at least 4 PhDs in this stream at the moment that I'm aware of. I don't know if there are any others. If you are, please identify yourself. Let's see if we can get the count up. We'll do like the idiot counter for Team Skeptic, but we'll do it on PhD. That'd be cool.
Yes, I forget her name, but there's one woman who's floating around the community who has a PhD, 2 masters, and like 3 bachelors or something like that. And you're just going, okay, well, way to one up. You know, you start to feel self-conscious. Yeah, what have I done with my life?
Yeah, never done a real day's work in their life, apparently. So they've just been studying.
That's right.
Yeah, you've got to study for a purpose, I think.
Keeping in vein with the channel, can someone explain to me how you can still believe in a flat Earth if you hop on a boat and move away from the land and notice that the last thing you see are the tallest things on the horizon as they disappear over the edge of the horizon? Why wouldn't those things just get smaller and smaller until you can't see them?
So you're saying that with a brain. These are people that don't have brains. They invent all sorts of things for it to not be a curve. They come up with, what's that, Aether band. Some guys made up this thing called an Aether band. He says, well, in that Aether band, that's where all images become compressed. So it looks like it's going over the horizon when it's not really. You know, they come up, if they spend half as much effort into actually studying what goes on as they put into making up things with no basis whatsoever to explain it away, they'd have the answer, and they wouldn't be, people wouldn't consider them idiots. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I've also heard refraction and the Rayleigh criterion,
Which have nothing to do with it. Well, refraction might.
They just throw out these words. They have no mechanism. You know, they have no quantitative model of how this would make the bottom, how this would affect the bottom of an object preferentially. But they throw out these terms, and they just, they ignore the fact that they don't really understand how what they're suggesting must work in order for it to behave as observed. And they do this all the time. They assume that having an actual model, having an actual quantitative understanding is completely unnecessary. You can make up the details of your quantitative model later. And that's their attitude to science. Their attitude is that, that the professional scientists fictionalize their results and then make up a quantitative model that will fit the theory they've come up with. So it's just a complete misunderstanding of how science actually works.
Oh, yes, but you heard Kyle yesterday. He said that you don't understand is not a valid argument.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an argument. It's a statement of truth.
Yes.
Yes, thankfully.
It's far more plausible that we are all existing inside a simulation. That's far more plausible than the fact that the Earth is flat, because, there's no evidence to support that the Earth is flat. Well, none that a reasonable person would ever accept, but it's entirely plausible that we exist inside a simulation.
Well, there's also no evidence for that, but it does. It's a theory that fits the facts. Put it that way.
I would say it's a theory that is not inconsistent with the facts, but it's also a theory with absolutely zero predictive power. We do not better understand or better model the physical behavior of the universe or the objects inside it on the understanding that it's a simulation. And it only begs the question of, okay, well, what are the laws of physics outside of the simulation? Are they different from what is the point of this simulation? Why is it happening? It doesn't answer any questions. It's just not, it's an unrefutable proposition that I think is kind of an intellectual waste of time from my perspective. But some high caliber physicists strongly disagree with me and would call me an idiot for saying it, but I said it anyway. So there.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, to be honest. It is a waste of time. A lot of things in science, well, not science, but a lot of things are just interesting thought experiments. And we're human beings, we're curious, we like to think along lines, and hopefully we get some insights out of it. And as you said, there's no predictive abilities for that thing, so it doesn't achieve anything, but it's interesting to think about. It tickles the mind. Do you have anything else to add to that, Pete, or? You still got Pete?
No, I was just going off on a mental tangent.
You're breaking up a lot, mate. Hello, Pete.
Oh, right. Sorry.
You're really darling out.
Hear me?
Yeah, I heard you can hear me, but I didn't hear anything else.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hopefully it stays that way. If it gets tough, just refresh and come back in.
My internet, or my computer runs a bit slow sometimes.
Yeah, it shouldn't be queuing up too many resources because most of this is on a server. So
nope.
Okay, I was just checking my Discord to see if MultiT0mT0m had responded, but no, he hasn't. What a surprise. All right, so what have we got happening in the chat? So Rachel's asking about the horizon. I'll leave Professor Bell to worry about that, I think. Let's see. Yes, Eileen Dover mentioned that when she was younger, she had 5 bachelors, and then she got married, and they all went away. Oh, dog walker. I'm sorry to hear that. He says that where he is, he's getting 500 new infections per day, and unfortunately, my aunt died of it yesterday. So sorry about that.
Well, that's
too common a story, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is tragic news, and I'm dreadfully sorry. Condolences to you and your family.
Yeah, I think everyone has at least 2 degrees of separation from someone who has been impacted by COVID anyway. I know it's probably about 6 or 7 people that I'm aware of within 2 degrees of separation who have it. So, yeah. Oh, it's an interesting comment from Professor Bell. Often what seems esoteric at one time becomes useful later on. The classic example of this is special relativity. And I guess he's right. You know, if someone expressed special relativity around the time of Newton, I'm not sure Newton got it. And yeah, it would have just been a nice thought thing, but hey, how can you ever prove it? And of course, later on, we could prove it. So yeah, that's a good thought.
It is a good thought, and I mean, you know, there is a lot of. However, it's going to need to be demonstrated to me how simulation theory can become practical, because I don't get it, and perhaps that's a failure of imagination on my part. It wouldn't be the first time I've been. That's been pointed out to me, but yeah.
Well, I find it, to me, simulation theory explains a lot of things where people see things, and UFOs and things like that. They could be just glitches in the programming, because all programming will have glitches, no matter how advanced the civilization who created it or not. So yeah, it will explain a few things. But there are other ways of explaining those things too. I saw Isaac Butterfield had a ghost hunting video, and I think he rigged most of that somehow. And he did a not finding Bigfoot video as well, and didn't find anything and didn't show anything that could be considered evidence and whatsoever. But hey, it was good entertainment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like a lot of stuff, cryptozoology, for instance, is very romantic. The idea that there may be these isolated populations of these relic life forms, hanging out in the Congolese jungle, or the reaches of the Amazon forest or what have you. That's very romantic. It would be nice if that were happening, actually. Sadly, in general, it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, I think there's one in Africa that's reported to be like a brontosaurus. Well, sorry, an apatosaurus, and that sort of size. But given it's at least 65 million years since they were walking the Earth, why would it have not evolved? I mean, I know some things, like sharks and crocodiles and things hang around for unchanged for that sort of length, but I can't imagine that the climate in Africa has stayed the same for that amount of time. So why wouldn't they have evolved? So if you see such a thing, is it really the apatosaurus? Or is it something else? And that's assuming if you did see it at all. I mean, that sort of area of the world, it's very much it's a superstitious sort of area, and they come up with all sorts of stories, almost as many as Flurfs, to explain things.
Well, I think they did. Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Sorry, I was.
No. I think a few years ago, they did an eDNA sweep of Loch Ness, and they just basically sequenced everything that they could possibly sequence. And you would imagine if there was a dinosaur in there taking enormous dumps on a regular basis, they would have picked up a lot of DNA. Well, they didn't find any DNA from a dinosaur. And what they did find, I think it suggested a species of eel, which was the most likely candidate for what people had seen if they weren't lying or on hallucinogenic drugs at the time when they were making those reports. So, invariably these things always turn out to be either, a bear, like the Himalayan Yeti is apparently an extinct species of bear, or they just turn out to be complete lies. Whereas I think, the stuff that has been released from the Pentagon around the Tic Tac UFO and that kind of stuff, to me, has some credibility about it, which is, you have to admit that no one knows what they really saw, but what they described seems to be the sort of technology that couldn't possibly be within the hands of a government on Earth here, or maybe it is, and that's probably the most likely explanation, that this is some kind of technology that's been developed by a government, possibly by the US government. Maybe it's a counterintelligence operation, and they're putting misinformation out there to make other governments around the world think, well, hey, hang on a second, the US has got this technology that can basically travel at light speed and make turns on a dime. We better watch out what we're doing. Who knows? You can get into conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff as well. I guess the nature of the universe and whether it's a simulation probably doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. Where here, you get born into this world, you don't get given a manual explaining to you what it is, and you need to work your way through it. And if we can help other people not to fall down rabbit holes that they end up wasting their entire life thinking about things that are complete nonsense, then that might be a start.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of benefit in that. That's why I've started my channel, to sort of guide people away from the things that are obviously false. And I guess that comes back to what I was saying earlier. There are certain things that people like to think about, that they think it's just fun to think about it, so they do it because for their own entertainment. But when it becomes their reality, that's another issue, isn't it? And that means they're wasting their time unproductively. It's one thing to be entertained because that's good for the soul and that helps you be more productive later on. But if you're going down rabbit holes and staying down there, that makes you antisocial. It makes you incapable of accepting information outside of that rabbit hole. And that makes you unproductive generally. And that makes you less useful to society, and that harms you because you can't partake in everything else that we do as a society, which gives benefit to everyone. But you want to steer people away from that. And it's a shame that the whole flat Earth thing had a resurgence about, I guess it's 6 years ago now. And a whole lot of young people fell for it because, and this is not to insult them, because they didn't have a lot of life experience, and so they didn't know any better, and they hadn't developed their cognitive reasoning abilities and things like that. And it seems to have died off because those same people who fell for it back then realized it was all crap, because they have developed those skills since then. And not to mention the fact that people like us have got on YouTube and presented lots of videos to show that it was a whole lot of crap. And people like, we're very grateful to have people like Tony in particular. This is your very first YouTube video, Pete, but Tony's been on for a while. And someone at that level who can bring that sort of level of knowledge and years and years of study into the subjects that we're talking about, and for the rest of us to consume it and realize, oh, okay, someone who's looked into it says it's like this, and we don't have to accept it because he's giving us tests to go and do for ourselves. So we go and do that, and then as a result, we're better off. We understand the world better, and therefore we can be productive as a result. Well, personally, thank you, Tony, for being someone with a PhD to actually bother with these idiots.
Well, I have to say, I started arguing against climate denialists, which is a pet peeve of mine. But I was doing it individually. I was just, in YouTube chats, just, explaining the science of it to people, and then I just became aware of this entire world of science denialism that was vastly more pervasive and just moronic than I had ever conceived. So I felt compelled. I just couldn't let that ride. I had to sort of step up. So, and the fact that the university went into lockdown probably gave me an excessive amount of free time in which to do this.
Clive Wells says Tony has been studying since the early days of science. His PhD was entitled "On the Mechanical Properties of the Luminiferous Ether."
Yes,
it could have been really rude and said something like, "This wheel thing, what's that all about?"
It's this wheel thing. It's yes. I was going to say, on the practical applications of a standardized writing system, but anyway, it's it really is. It really just bugs me, and obviously it's an irrational sort of problem of mine. Just the degree, hearing some smug, pathetically ignorant idiot get up and hold forth on stuff that is just demonstrably stupid really bugs me. I can't tolerate it anyway.
Well, MultiT0mT0m's a perfect example. He knows nothing about anything. All these videos demonstrate that, and yet he's absolutely certain he's right, and he knows more than any PhD because he made a challenge to debate any PhD anywhere, anytime, and he hasn't even shown up. What a gutless wonder.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say, like, people have been, Sleeping Warrior, for instance, calls me gutless because I won't go onto his Discord server, and I won't go onto Oakley's channel, and this, that, and the other.
But he won't come to us. So.
Yeah, well, I'll debate him in any neutral on any neutral platform. And he said, well, there's no such thing as a neutral platform. And I'm going, well, then, if that's your attitude, we won't debate then. I don't need to do that. But him turning around and using 6-year-old insults like I dare you, I double dare. Okay. Call me a pussy to arts content. I don't care.
That's highbrow for him to use those sort of insults.
That is.
He usually goes for the pedophile slur. So.
I think that I was just thinking about this whole anti-science, anti-logic, anti-reason movement that's taken over in some sections of society. I mean, they're really, when you look at them and you boil them down, it's a it's a psychological thing, and it's really a cult or a collection of cults where people just throw out all reason and they blindly follow what somebody else is telling them, even when it's complete nonsense. And to the point that they will, you know, in the case of some cases, they will follow that to death or to violence. There's a excellent YouTuber, I don't know if you've heard of him, called Telltale. So if you're interested in the psychology of cults, go and have a look at Telltale. He's great.
Yeah, we often discuss Flat Earth as if it's a cult. It doesn't necessarily meet all the requirements of a cult, but it's very cult-like. That's you can definitely say that because it's really ironic the way they say, "Oh, you ballers, you just accept whatever anyone tells you," especially about things like coronavirus and 5G and things like that. But of course, we don't just accept those things. And we're certainly not going to just accept things from these guys just because they tell us, and yet they're arguing that we do that. It's mind bending.
It is mind bending. Yeah, they've got a huge. I've referenced it earlier, but they've got this fuzzy thinking thing going on, where there's this intellectual blind spot where they just don't see the need for a confirmable model, and they don't understand how to confirm a model, even if they had a model. When
they talk model, they think airfix model. They don't think conceptual model.
Right.
It makes it hard to talk about it because you're not talking the same language.
Yes.
Well, maybe let's get a PhD in psychology on here to discuss these things.
Well, we have a master's in sociology, which is pretty close, but I think she's asleep right now.
Probably is, yes. She has a lot of insights that are really quite good.
Pete, she's from Ireland. That's why I'm saying that.
All right.
Yeah, we get used to being a worldwide culture here, don't we? We just forget.
Yeah, we do.
Some people are asleep while we're awake and that kind of thing.
Stupid time zones. If only.
Well, wasn't so long ago.
They didn't exist.
Phone call was a fortune. So,
yes, that's right.
Yes, if time zones didn't exist, like they wouldn't be needed on a flat Earth, of course. So.
Exactly. Yes.
If time didn't exist, we wouldn't exist either. So.
Yeah, what would you measure it to? Night, Faux Hammer. Faux Hammer saying night.
Okay. All right. Good night, Faux Hammer.
Yeah, I guess it's this started at 10:30 UTC, so we must be almost, we're past midnight, I'd say. So, oh no, we're coming up to midnight. Yeah, it's getting late in the UK, and I guess a lot of the Americans will still be with us for a while, and whoever's in Australasia. Haven't seen many New Zealanders here yet, though. I like Dora is a very clever person. She's in Holland.
Yes.
They got a huge, and then a 4-dot ellipsis. Dora, come on. Oh, you're Dutch, I guess. English isn't the thing. But we have a hue, much better. I kind of ruined that by being a pedant, but anyway. Ricky Bell, 550. Is that Los Angeles? No, that seems more like East Coast USS. USS? I'm thinking of the Enterprise. All right. So any more questions for our PhDs? The night is young in the UK. Yes, you've only had 4 scotches or something.
So I just want to say there is some chatter about radar. So we can use radar to determine the distance to, say, Venus. And we know that Venus, so we can confirm, how close or how far away Venus is directly using radar. And we know that Venus transits in front of the sun, so we can tell that the sun is further away than Venus is. But we can also, and this is rather subtle, but you can get radar echoes off the sun. I think it takes 17 minutes to get radar echoes back, but there have been points where we've been able to get radar echoes off the sun. It's not as accurate in terms of distance calculations because there's so much noise associated with these observations, but even so, there are radar observations of how far away the sun is. So it's and the fact that not everybody can do this shouldn't be an excuse to reject these findings, I don't think.
Absolutely.
I don't have an
X-ray
X-ray
at all.
I don't have an X-ray machine. I don't come to the conclusion I don't have bones.
Yes, that's full of logic there, right there.
Yeah.
Pete, any similar concepts from your field?
Sorry, I was just tending to the 3-week-old. So.
Oh, okay. Yes,
What
you've got
was
to be
the
a dad
question?
occasionally. Oh, don't worry. We were just talking about, well, I mean, the analogy that Tony used was that because I don't have access to an X-ray, that doesn't mean I don't believe I don't have bones. God, that's full of negatives.
I don't come to the conclusion I don't have bones because I don't personally know how to operate an X-ray machine, nor have an X-ray machine available to me. Just because I don't have an instrument doesn't validate the conclusion that everybody who does have an instrument is lying to me.
Oh yeah, and I've heard that some people will try to argue that because they don't understand the mathematics, that you must just be full of crap, and therefore they won't believe what they're being told. I suppose once you get to that point in an argument, you probably are wasting the oxygen that you're burning trying to think of a response to that, and you should probably leave as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
you should, but they don't. First, often say they discount maths because maths isn't real. They say, like, if you have 2 apples and you take away one, what do you have? And they'll say, you still have 2 apples. The apple still exists in the real world. That's their logic.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've heard Sleeping Warrior say pretty much that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Pete hasn't come across Sleeping Warrior.
So this is the thing. Like, yes, you can describe anything with mathematics, but more importantly, you can use mathematics to describe reality with great accuracy. And it's not easy to come up with a mathematical model that matches all of our observations. There aren't there aren't that many models that match our observations. There are only a few. That's the power of observations. We can exclude the vast majority of mathematical models of reality and focus on those that actually accord with reality. And so the idea that, the maths can just be made up. You only say that because you don't know how difficult it is to construct an accurate model of what's actually going on. If you had any concept of how difficult that was, you'd understand that just can't work. It's not the case that all mathematical models are equally able to explain reality. Some, only a very, very few models actually accord with what reality is.
Well, the other thing about maths is it's self-verifying. You'll know if you've got a mistake in it or not. So if you do successfully come up with a model that works, that has predictive qualities, you already know that that the mathematics is sound, because otherwise you wouldn't get anywhere. I remember doing triple integrals and things like that, and I realized if I got an answer and I realized, no, that doesn't look right at all, and I go back and I said, yes, I've made a mistake here, and I correct the mistake, and then I get an answer that makes sense. So.
I've always thought that it's certainly the case that if God speaks any language at all, she speaks maths. because that is the language of the universe. It's the only language of the universe that we can use to describe what we see. And like you said, it's the only thing that makes sense. If all the human languages that we use to talk to each other in all end up in semantics and problems with miscommunication, but you can't misunderstand mathematics unless you're a fool.
Are you gender presuming God? Surely God is Z.
That's a good point. I forgot. A Z. Is it Z? Z?
Yeah, Z-H-E. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was just reading in the chat. Oh, Faux Hammer's, I thought he went to bed. He's still there. Let's see. Nice way to well, I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I like the way he's expressed it. Frankos Rooney says, radio telescopes on their own prove that flat Earth claims are bullshit.
Yes. And in fact, there's a technique called very long baseline interferometry, VLBI, sorry, which uses interferometric signals from distant quasars to precisely calculate the shape of the Earth. Unfortunately, it requires, a huge radio telescope. It's very sensitive to any motions of the telescope, but also any deformations inside the telescope, and so there are thermal effects. And you can basically only build these where there's land. So it's got serious limitations. It's expensive, and but nonetheless, people have been using this for years to work out the shape of the Earth. So somebody comes up and says, well, the Earth is flat. Yeah, I don't think so, because that's not the result we get from the, A, just throwing up a satellite, but B, VLBI.
Well,
or satellite
about
laser ranging.
Go, Tony.
Or satellite laser ranging, or GPS, or just anything. Doris.
Well, yeah, the distrust of those things, it comes back to distrust, doesn't it? They don't trust anyone, really.
All right.
So, and, like GPS, for example, they don't believe there are satellites because they don't trust the government that it's real. They believe it's a dome up there, not space. So that can't be real. So therefore, there are ground towers, which enable GPS to work. But that doesn't work in the middle of the ocean, especially some place like the Southern Ocean, when you're almost off Antarctica. And how do they explain the South Pole Station? Surely that's the edge of the ice wall. So the thing about the whole flat Earth idea is it comes up with more questions than it solves. What's keeping the sun up in the sky? What's the dome made of? Where does it hit the Earth? If it's at the South Pole, how come the station there doesn't see it? There's so many questions that just come up that aren't answered by that model. Go, Tony?
No, but it must be true, because that's why we haven't found MH370, because those satellites don't exist. So it must be true.
Maybe MH370 flew outside the dome somehow. That's why we haven't found it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Or it was aliens.
MH370 was a very, very weird case. That's the other thing these people can do, is watch air crash investigations, because a lot of the stuff that they peddle would be instantly debunked if they bothered to do that. But yeah, it's so the sun is also an interesting one, right? Because they're all very interested in the inverse square law of light, right? Now let's assume that the sun is local. Let's assume that the sun is, but the Earth, we know, is at least 13,000 kilometers side to side, right? If it's a disk, it's got to be about 13,500 kilometers across. And so that means if the sun is only a few hundred kilometers overhead, it goes to being thousands of kilometers away at the North Pole, for instance, or at the South Pole. So now we can apply the inverse square law to radiation emitted by the sun, and we can work out that let's suppose that it's you should only be. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. I haven't eaten my breakfast yet. But if it's only a few hundred kilometers overhead and you're sending light to thousands of kilometers away, you should receive much less radiation per unit area from something that's pointing at the sun. We can demonstrate that that isn't true. The sun doesn't look noticeably dimmer at the North Pole. It's not, it looks just as bright as it does. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just so. But they will bring up the inverse square law of light propagation to try and argue that light from the moon can't possibly be reflected. But they don't understand how it works. Anyway.
Well, that's the thing. They latch onto the thing that they like and ignore everything else that says, well, no, you've got to take into more things into account, or that's a load of rubbish. They start from the point of view, I want this to be true. Let me find something that supports that. Instead of, okay, I want to figure out what's true. So what evidence is there? What does that tell me? Okay, I'll form my opinion based on that. So let's do it the other way around from the way they should. Well, conspiracy nutters in general, 5G. Oh, people are getting coronavirus. 5G is being rolled out, so therefore 5G creates coronavirus, even though coronavirus is in places that don't have 5G. They ignore that piece of the fat puzzle.
Religious fundamentalists, by the sound of it.
Effectively. And, of course, they accuse us of being religious fundamentalists. It's just crazy. That's projection, isn't it? You want to make sure what someone's up to, see what they're accusing other people of. That's what they're up to. But what you were talking about with the sun, Tony, is I'm going to be releasing a video tomorrow morning, our time, along those lines. So we just had the solstice, which meant in the flat Earth model, at least, the sun is over the Tropic of Capricorn. I mean, it is a globe model too, but in a different sense. So that means the further away to the south you are from the Tropic of Capricorn, you'd expect less light, wouldn't you? Because you're getting further away from the sun. But if you go, and I asked for people to help me confirm this, I only got one response and it was a cloudy day, so I didn't get it. But timeanddate.com will give you the sunrise and sunset of anywhere on Earth, basically, or any land place has a city. And you can demonstrably show that the further south you go, the longer the day is at the December solstice. And for the June solstice in the northern hemisphere, the further north you go, the longer the day is. And that's contrary to flat Earth, because flat Earth, that wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen, because it implies the sun is actually further south rather than on the Tropic of Capricorn, which is where flat Earth says it has to be. Never mind the fact that they don't explain how the sun's just hanging in the air, So there's just so many things wrong. If they bother to sit down and catalog how must this work in order to get the results that we want, they'd understand. But they don't. They skip that part. They think that it can be filled in later or by somebody who understands maths or whatever. I don't. I don't particularly. I don't get it. There's a lot of stuff I don't get. I feel like Roger Ramjet. There's an episode of Roger Ramjet where it's discovered that he has no sense of humor, and this allows him to save the Earth from aliens. But he spends the entire episode saying, "I don't get it." And whenever I hear flat earthers, I think much the same thing. I just don't understand. Well, that's because there's nothing to get in their case. They've just made it up, basically. And they got it wrong. It's demonstrably wrong.
Well, I've obviously never flown in an airliner at 40,000 feet, looked out the window on a clear day, because you can see the curvature of the Earth with your own eyes.
Well,
it's quite bizarre.
You can only just see it at that height. But it is there, but they would just say, no, I can't see it, because it's only just there. So the Earth is huge. You know, it's you have to go. Even at a friend of ours sent up a weather balloon, went up to 38 kilometers, so a lot higher than a commercial airliner, 10 times as high. And you can only just make out the curve there at that height. You really need to get way above that, above 100 kilometers to see it quite well. And it's just simply because the Earth is huge. That's the way it is. There is a sea level test you can do. You can get some things. It's been done many times. You get some couple of levels that are metal, so they're not going to bend, and put the horizon of the ocean behind it, on a cliff somewhere, and take a photo, and then you compress the photo horizontally, and the curve becomes apparent. And that alone shows just how big the curve is. You need a wide enough field of view to be able to see it. You can't just see just a little tiny 10 degrees or something and say you can see it. They did say there's what are they called? The Blackbirds, the spy plane. There's one you can actually go up in. James May did it. And they go up to 72,000 feet, which is quite high, not quite as high as the balloon. But apparently James May could tell the curvature of the Earth from up there. So that's one thing you can do for yourself. It'd be better than just 38,000 meters. So, and I said 72,000 feet, didn't I? Yeah, I'm not sure how high that is. Yeah. Well, bloody, why does everyone just use metric? We don't get confused.
Okay. It's 21, it's about 22 kilometers.
Yeah. So yeah, it's almost as high as the balloon, but not quite. So yeah, you can still tell it's there, but it's not really obvious. You need to get higher than that to make it really obvious. But balloons don't go much higher than that because there isn't much atmosphere up at that level, and you need atmosphere for buoyancy, and you can only take up so much weight in cameras and things. Otherwise, you have to get a massive balloon, But and that has its own problems of controlling it and everything. Anyway, that's just one example of how easy it is to prove that the Earth's not flat.
Yes, and that science works.
And yeah, of course, it's been measured to be not flat many times. So, but hey, they just ignore that. That's the way conspiracy theorist mind works. They just ignore anything that they don't want to hear. You don't have to argue against things you don't pay attention to. That's why they say that things like maths isn't real and stuff like that, or you don't understand is not an argument.
Yes, that's right. But it seems to be all they've got. I don't know why I sound surprised by that, or as though it's some newfound revelation that no one's ever had before. But it's just they turn their inability to comprehend or to follow an argument into some sort of weird asset.
A perceived strength, even though they've incorrectly perceived it.
Yes.
Well, I was disturbed when I was looking through some of these videos to prepare for this, because I've never seen this stuff before in my life. And the YouTube ad, so someone's paying YouTube to put their ads on YouTube, selling a 5G proof cloak that you can wear to protect yourself from 5G radiation. And initially I thought this person was like the chief of all morons, and now I realize that they're actually brilliant, because they're making probably quite a lot of money out of complete idiocy. The only thing they haven't done is achieved a tax-free status, but they could do that if they put a little bit more pomp and ceremony around what they're doing. But I mean, what a great way to make money. I'm thinking of doing it myself.
Well, well, yes, why not? You may as well make money out of idiots because the fool needs money is soon parted. That's why we have what we call POEs, parody of extremists. There are several flat earthers in particular anyway, and there's a few 5G nutters and anti-vaxxers and things who are clearly making money out of this because they get idiots to follow them. And if you get idiots to follow them, you're attracting eyeballs, so therefore people will pay you for advertising. The 5G cloak, what an idea. What else can we do? Well, like it's like in The Simpsons, you go to Tiger Rock. Lisa wasn't trying to sell it to Homer, but he bought it. He said, that's like saying this rock keeps away tigers, you know? And Homer says, go on. He says, well, here's a rock. I haven't seen any tigers lately. He says, oh, here's $5 for the rock, you know? And that's basically what they're doing. They're taking advantage of these people's idiocy and paranoia. And in a sense, they deserve it.
Yes, though that there is a very real sense in which they deserve it, and I mean, you know, it does. You know, it's difficult because you do get to a point where, okay, is it then all right to is it exploiting a myth, exploiting an unfounded myth is one thing. Creating and propagating that myth so that you can make money off it is a different thing. And that's what I feel, you know, that if, sort of...
Especially when it's, you know, could be harmful too. Like, you know, the COVIDiots, for example.
Yes. That's you know, it's a well, it's what I object to most about Oakley, actually. You know, if he were out there selling, you know, flat Earth merchandise or whatever, fine. You know, if people want to buy flat Earth merchandise, that's their decision. But he's actually out there propagating the myth precisely to profit from it. And that's what I regard as immoral. You know, it just and it you know, getting back to Pete's earlier point, it's worse than that because people are actually politically exploiting this. You know, people are peddling these myths so that they can politically exploit them, so that they can win office or win notoriety and fame. So they're trying for a different form of profit, but they are just as cynically trying to profit from what was going on.
You know, with the whole, we've just had a lockdown here in Brisbane over the weekend. We had a 3-day lockdown. Some cleaner at a quarantine place where people coming from overseas quarantine for 2 weeks got COVID, the new strain from the UK that's supposed to be 70% more virulent. So they wanted to lock us down, and hopefully, you know, the cases would become apparent and slow down the spread of it if it is out there in the community. Thankfully, there's only been that cleaner and one other person discovered with it so far, so hopefully it stays that way. And I was quite impressed at how community-minded the majority of people were. I saw a few idiots on the street who would point and laugh at masks and things, and you think, what's wrong with these people? But the vast majority of people were wearing masks, and that was really awesome. Because we haven't had too many cases here in Queensland up until now, hardly anyone's worn a mask, and then suddenly everyone was. And it's nice to see that people are generally community-minded. But I do want to show you guys something. Yep, there it is. I'll make that full screen so it's easier to see. So there was this video that was posted to, the Premier announced it on Monday at 9 o'clock, that the 3-day lockdown had been successful, and so they were going to lift the restrictions. I was appalled at the number of COVIDiots who responded in the comments. I actually made my own comments, but they're so far down the stream, I'm not sure I can get to them. But let's have a look. There's a few political type ones. I don't really want to go in that. A few jokes like, can I wear a Batman mask, or would a Joker offer more protection? Yes. If all you think this is finished, think again. This will get even worse. I think they meant to say 2021 will be a whopper, and it's hard not to believe that. It probably will be worse, but the more we take to prevent it, the more likely it is not to be worse. Okay, so here's another. Wake up, people. The only reason they lifted restrictions is because the Indian cricket team threatened to boycott the Gabba Test. Wake up. Actually, no, that's a joke. I just saw wake up. When I read through this morning, there was heaps of them. It's probably had a few more added, I guess. Where are we? The crazies are here on another level. That's probably got a few responses. What do you mean? The ones that believe there is a pandemic and no one is dying, and insane would have people believe the mainstream media. I think we should be making lists prescription, if you may, after the rule of law is brought to Australia for the first time. Then we can start to have a list of people who are proscribed. Is that your real name, Maitland? What? It's common that they have no idea of grammar or spelling or how to express themselves, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, proscription is a word to proscribe somebody.
But I don't think it's got anything to do here, is it? Doesn't match the context.
Well, I think proscription is a legal. I'm going to need to look it up, but I think it is.
It could be, but I can't imagine that someone who writes lists with an extra and a superfluous apostrophe knows what proscription means.
No. Yeah. So it's a
those watching on their phone because this will be a bit small.
Yeah, but it's a weird. It's a weird element. Actually, I wear a mask whenever I go outside into a public space.
It improves my look.
Yeah, it significantly improves mine. But living in Canberra, nobody's, we don't have any cases here at the moment. I just do it as a precaution, and I've come to two conclusions. A, if I have to wear a mask every time I go outside for the rest of my life, really not a big deal. It doesn't matter. It's not such an imposition that it's going to destroy my life if that has to happen. But B, that isn't the timescale we're talking about. We're talking about until the vaccine kicks in and and has an opportunity to bring things under control. That's even less of a big deal. Like, that's just, surely everyone can do that. Dora says to hide my face. It is that bad to look at, Dora. You're very kind, but seriously.
Well, it's my avatar. I wear a mask anyway. So. It's just a public service, action I take.
Yeah. Have you considered pants, though? I mean, the mask is all well and good, but perhaps less investment in masks and more in pants. Just putting it out there for your consideration.
Well, I don't care about pants because I haven't seen my legs in years.
Okay.
Anyway, so here's one nutter. Conjob 19, scam and a hoax. Ignore any restrictions. Now, what's the bet that guy heard someone else tell him that? And so he says, yeah, it is a scam. They just sort of follow this sheep following one particular leader, I guess, who's not a very good leader. Where else? So I'll try to get down. It's nice to see that these sort of spamming posts by with a provocative photo also come to Channel 10, not just my channel.
All right.
So that's interesting. When I looked through this morning, there were nutters everywhere.
Maybe they have maybe they went through and weeded it out.
Maybe they did, actually, yeah, because the one I've seen so far was just in a reply, so they're not the main message.
The test of obedience is over. I think there's one of your biggest nutters.
And my computer's deciding not to display the rest at the moment. I did... let me see if I can do this. I did screenshot my. Do it that way then. Come on, just display it. And now I have to make it bigger. All right, so this will be. I can make it bigger. That's good. So this guy says Harold, and stop censoring Harold, of course. Wearing a mask in the gym, this power-hungry double chin is frothing over how much authority she has. Don't forget, this was all for one case. So I respond to that, yep, without the lockdown, it could have been thousands, including several deaths and millions, if not billions, in lost production. Huge benefit for the price of 3 days isolation. Yeah. And someone else said one case that could have been a lot more of an extremely infectious strain. I'm extremely grateful to them for having done this to ensure it was contained. Let's go to the next one. Oops, it's gone on the wrong screen. Back over here. So this is continuing on from the last one. So could have been. How can you know for sure? So, this is Harold responding to me about saying it could have been thousands. How can you know for sure? So sad to see smart people giving up their freedom so easily. And further down, it's not going to let me do that. I said, you mean like the freedom to live if I die of COVID? You're not demonstrating a lot of useful thought to the internet, chum. Makes it hard to take your point of view seriously. I'm guessing you also think the earth is flat? He never denied that the earth was flat.
Okay.
So this one. So, and he responded, let's see if I'll just make that bigger. You won't die of COVID, mate. You'll die with COVID. Yeah, that's an important distinction. There's so many causes, especially in America, where people have committed suicide by shootings themselves in the head. They also happen to have COVID at their point of death. That death counts as a COVID death. Saying someone isn't demonstrating a lot of useful thought by making assumptions is very hypocritical. He's projecting.
I actually, Pete may be in a better position to adjudicate that, but my understanding is that his statement there is false, right? Even if it weren't false, it would be irrelevant. We can show that the rate of mortality has increased markedly over the past 13 months globally. But I don't think that somebody who has suicided is going to be tested for COVID. I don't think that that's going to count as a COVID death.
I did hear that some hospitals got more funding if they called deaths COVID deaths. But yeah, you never know. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you got COVID and you die, well, sure, there might be other ways, but what do you think the majority of the cases are going to be?
Yeah.
I mean, how many suicides are there? I mean, it's not much of an example, is there?
No, it's not much of an example, but the base statistic here is excess mortality, which is to say at what rate are people dying compared to the rate at which people normally die. And the reality is that it's going to be years before we have a better idea of sort of the long-term impacts of COVID on mortality, because people seem to be suffering long-term consequences that seem likely to have an adverse impact on their life expectancy moving down the track. But you're not going to be able to detect that for years yet. So this spike is not necessarily restricted to when this period. This spike should, it seems, have a long tail as sort of the impact of COVID settles down into a background signal. But that's just my that's just my hypothesis.
What do you think, Pete?
You're entirely correct that if somebody dies from a gunshot wound to the head, nobody is going to test them for COVID. So it's just completely false, which is the modus operandi for people who peddle bullshit. And the COVID death rate in Australia is it's around 3%. So 3% of people who become infected with the virus will die of the disease that is caused by the virus. And I think what's alarming is more that it's the elderly and the infirm that are being, and the sick that are really being affected by this, more so than they would be if we didn't have COVID-19. And I suppose it goes back to that thing of, oh, well, it's just another virus. And again, yes, it is. But why do we need to have another virus circulating the earth and killing off people? 3% of the population who become infected. If you multiply that out across the number of people who are infected by this, especially these new strains like the ones that they've got in the UK that are far more good at penetrating the human immune response, then why would we want that anyway? It's still a problem. Why would it be a hoax? What's the benefit of hoaxing for that? And usually the people that claim that this is some kind of hoax, unfortunately, they will claim to be from the conservative right-wing side of politics, and they will claim that it's all some kind of socialist communist agenda to suppress the population. And you can see it in the media in Australia. They describe the Victorian Premier as Chairman Dan, but when the Liberal Premier which in Australia, Liberal means conservative, go figure, but that's what it means. That's why we're down under. But the Conservative Premier in New South Wales, who they all love, locks down the state and does other things that are equally as socialist and communist in nature as her progressive counterparts, but they never say a word about it.
Yeah, I think it's unfair to say that all of them are on the right-wing side of things, because I think of people like Oakley, for example. He never seems to express any political leaning. So it's not the left saying it. Yes, I think that's right. But yeah, it's not necessarily just right-wingers, but there are a lot of right-wingers out there, in the same way there are, as Gary Benga said, there were many nurses who aren't taking the vaccine. So
it's overwhelmingly a right-wing issue. It's a problem, a psychological malaise that's associated with people who identify as right-wing conservatives, and libertarians especially. Even though you can have left-wing libertarians and right-wing libertarians, it's not a left and right construct. But that idea that government should stop probing me up the backside and let me do my own probing if I should so like to, and that includes probing me with vaccinations.
Ooh, promises.
Yeah, this whole thing about libertarianism is built on a failure to understand how society works. A lot of the stuff that we have laws for, we have laws because we tried not having laws about this stuff and it didn't work. It cost lives. It killed people, and it damaged productivity. And so we figured we were better off with the laws than without the laws. And you can go through the entire experience again if you want. Just go off and do it with your own lives and your own money, because we're very happy where we are. Thank you very much. From my childhood, there was a similar amount of intellectual dishonesty on the left when I was a teenager, when I was a young man, about the validity of communist Russia as an effective and benevolent form of government. And people on the left in that circumstance went to enormous contortions of cognitive dissonance in order to refuse to acknowledge the manifest failures of that particular or of that government and that entire system of government. So it's not purely a property of right wing or left wing. The common feature is when observable reality starts throwing up results that directly contradict what you're going to say. At that point, people are very capable of making up, of misinterpreting, distorting, abandoning logic and appealing to special cases. It's one of the weirder properties that humans have. Yeah, we need to slap it down wherever it arises and whomever espouses it. I think it needs active opposition.
Intellectual honesty, I think that's the term. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And if that's something that needs to be taught, unfortunately, because it's not something that people just naturally pick up. But if we can be intellectually honest about observing the world around us and clinging to what is reality and rejecting that which is not, and making decisions that are based on what we observe and what we've tested, then we'll be in a better position than what we otherwise would be. Unfortunately, that is not the overwhelming approach that is ruling the world at the moment.
Yeah, there seems to be a morbid fear of being wrong, as though making a mistake, misspeaking, making some sort of error, as though that would be the death knell, rather than saying, okay, well, I was wrong, and just getting over it and moving on. It seems we punish politicians who admit that they were wrong, and we reward politicians who refuse to admit that they're wrong. So for some reason, we as a society just don't like people who are intellectually honest. And I kind of think that as news consumers, we need to grow up and have realistic expectations of people. They're going to be wrong sometimes. Deal with it.
Yeah, they're human beings after all. Everyone should be celebrated for making mistakes, as long as there might be consequences as a result of their mistakes, but that's fine too. You can't treat them. That's what we're saying earlier. That the flirts dig themselves into this rabbit hole of nonsense and never come out. And because of that, that's why we exist, I guess, to point out why they're wrong. So we need to go. We've been going for 2 hours anyway, and I know Pete needs to go very soon. So thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed PhD Pete's first YouTube appearance. I hope we'll get him on again at some point. We'll talk about something maybe closer to his specialty. That'd be interesting. Thank you, Tony, for being on here. If you like this, please give it a like or a downvote if you want. I don't care. It's all interaction for the algorithm. If you have a look at a few of my other videos, another one coming out tomorrow morning, click subscribe if you like what I do, and don't forget the bell notification. And I think that will end it there. So there's nothing left to do. Will this work? It's not working yet. So there's nothing left to do but cue the Corgi.
You're despicable.
HUGH JARSZ says, I love HUGH JARSZ and I cannot lie.